So I did it. I read History is All You Left Me by Silvera, and this book has left nothing within me. It has made me a hollow shell of the man I once was. I am looking at the back of this book, and I'm seeing all lovely reviews by Patrick Nass and Nicola Yoon and all of these amazing authors, and then I'm seeing the price tag, and this book cost 1445 rupees, which is roughly the cost of a US hardback. I don't know how I feel about paying that much. I decided to read this book initially because I wanted another installment, another go in this particular genre that I keep finding on Book Talk and in young adult fiction that I call the PJO fan fiction genre. It's basically a love story between two gay guys that starts off with them becoming strangers. Then they become friends tentatively and realize things about themselves they had not realized before, and then they fall in love. Now, you might think this is just like the formula for every single love story ever being produced today or ever, but that's not the case. This genre is that they're wildly successful and considered to be these tales of heartache and grief and coming of age that has never ever been done before. But I just find it to be poorly written Song of Achilles fanfiction. Basically, two guys fall in love, and then, due to some hurdle, in this case grief, death, a dystopian world, internalized homophobia, why not? Royal responsibility? Yes, it's a very compelling plot. Two people who are not supposed to be together are in love. That has never been done before. But the thing with these books, and particularly Silvera books, and particularly this Silvera book, is that the plot might sound very compelling, and perhaps it even is, but the characters are rarely ever so. Even though I take literature and I pride myself on reading a diverse range of books and reading books that are difficult to read or hard or thick or books that I find challenging, at the same time, I can read a book just to have a good time. I know, shocker. I can read a book just for the pure enjoyment of reading a book and immersing myself into a fun little story, in the same way that I have a huge appreciation for rom-coms or the music of ABBA. I can appreciate these things. In fact, I have seen many writers do it very well. Sophie Kinsella being a prime example of that. I have read more Sophie Kinsella books than I think a lot of people have read classic authors in their lifetime. I love this woman. She makes me laugh. She makes me romanticize and think that things about me are endearing, which other people and otherwise I myself may not find. So I can have a good time with the book. I can read guilty pleasure books, and I can read books just for reading the book. But with this book, it's like I'm not having a good time, but the book thinks it's doing something, but it's not doing anything at all. The book itself is that we kind of alternate between the past and the present from the perspective of our protagonist, Griffin, who is grieving the loss of his ex-boyfriend, Theodore. That means we are always in Griffin's head. And on top of that, he has obsessive compulsive disorder and he has very low self-esteem, so that means we are uncomfortably in Griffin's head all of the time. I guess it's supposed to be claustrophobic in a way because his thoughts and his feelings are written in a very much stream of consciousness style, if I'm using that term correctly, and we're always in his head. You would think that if the book is addressed to you, the reader, who is supposed to be Theodore, and the book is from the perspective of this guy struggling with grief, it would be very, very palpable and visceral and an experience, to say the least. The book is an experience, but I don't think it's the good kind. It felt like the book was not giving us anything, girl. There was absolutely nothing. And I'm someone who loves the concept of grief in itself. I love hearing people's stories about grief. I love that Joan Didion quote about her going crazy over the grief that she feels after the death of her husband. I love reading about grief. I love reading about suffering, okay? I am a masochist. I like reading those things. I seek out lyrics that hurt me and haunt me and tell me exactly why my particular situation is the worst situation to possibly be in. But this book does not do what it could have done. There are so many points in this book where we are in kind of this like spiral of Griffith's obsessive compulsive thoughts and his desire to do things and how he feels and how he's obsessing over Theodore. But I feel like it could have just gone a little bit a notch extra. And now maybe it's because this book is written for 14-year-old kids, so it's not supposed to be that intense. But considering the fact that the book dealt with grief and sex and infidelity and all of these really serious, I guess, topics, then they would at least be comfortable exploring the ramifications of grief when someone's so young. I don't see that happening at all though in this book. Is it when Griffin starts thinking his toxic loop spirals, then we feel like it gets crazier and crazier every time. I want to see him follow through with it. I want the author, I want to actually be shown something that if told that it's really bad. I want him to like do more than tug at his ear or just. I want him to go crazy. Think of how a mentally unstable person would deal with grief, especially someone with OCD. Would they not do dangerous, stupid, ridiculous things? But instead we see these tiny little microaggressions. In fact, the whole book is like very tiny bits of what could have been. In fact, Griffin's grief in and of itself kind of feels like how someone would deal with grief months and months, maybe even years after the fact. Griffin deals with his grief the very day that he hears of it, because the story is told from that perspective. At the very end of the book, we see the very first time he got news of Theodore's passing. But we never are given enough. And we're told that he thinks about this reminds him of Theodore, this reminds him of that person, this reminds him of Theodore's song, Theodore's stories, when we're told stories of Theodore. I think that is important to the story, at least from, I guess, a practical perspective. But we don't feel anything in the way that we would. We don't get attached to Theodore. In my opinion, if you're writing a book about grief and it's addressed to someone who is dead, that person should feel like almost another character in of itself in the story. But I don't get that thing with Theodore. You know, he's endearing, they make him out to be this golden boy figure, whatever, complicate that image slightly, yeah, whatever, they do the things you're supposed to do with a character like that. But at the same time, I never see him truly just describe the physical, I guess, symptoms of grief. Especially reading reviews of this book and people talking about the morally ambiguous characters and ending, and yeah, there were certainly some twists and turns that I was not expecting, especially because I already read another Adam Silvera book, so I just kind of expected it to be pretty vanilla stuff, like, you know, a Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda kind of fan fiction. But the book itself, it took these really interesting plot points and these really interesting ways of looking at characters and then not delivering in them at all. Point would be, spoiler alert, but our protagonist ends up having a relationship with Jackson, Theodore's new boyfriend, after he moves to California, right? And I was waiting for that. I love, for some reason, romance in the wake of tragedy. I love those kind of stories. I live and die by those kind of stories. I find them so interesting. One of my favorite books, The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson, deals with exactly that. And ever since I read that book, I have been so fascinated with the idea of someone coping with their grief, but also experiencing something so novel yet so human like romance along with this peak suffering, you know. And I felt that I do see those kind of things, like the structure, I guess, is there, but it's never fully delivered upon. The book sucks is that Griffin sucks. Look, I have to say it, I don't know what you guys see in this protagonist. I don't know what anyone sees in this book after being in his head for so long. Now, I don't mind flawed protagonists. I really don't. I love reading about deplorable, horrible, depraved human beings. You know, I love My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Tasha Moshrag. I love reading about Yossarian. I love reading about books through the lens of characters who have no kind of conscience and who are pathetic. I really don't mind reading those books if they are done well. Going by Your Name, again, a prime example. Elio is kind of pathetic, kind of awesome at the same time, but Griffin is just pathetic. Like, throughout the book, I understand that he has OCD or whatever, and I totally get that, but at the same time, he expects everybody around him to kind of just accommodate his compulsions over and over again. It's very, like, self-indulgent and never tries to actually deal with them in a way. I don't think anyone in his life also does either. He's very selfish as well, and I think that's not only just can be seen through his deciding to be with Wade randomly, which was not at all something that the book built upon, but also his decision to continuously like be with people to take revenge on some other person. At certain points in the book, I thought he was going to kill himself. At the end of the book, I was like, maybe Adam Silvera does this. Maybe Adam Silvera just kills people and he's just known for being a ruthless killer. And I wouldn't have minded that story as much if that had been built upon. And even his relationship or whatever with Jackson, it's like not even a relationship, it's so surface level. Griffin as a character, so surface level, he's so boring, he's so vanilla. I cannot tell you a single thing about this guy except that he is very codependent, and I feel like even that codependency could have been something that I could have empathized with or enjoyed reading, or made me feel something if it was just written well. I think despite the fact that the book is of course an apostrophe in prose, it's just not very good prose. I don't think that Adam Silvera is a horrible writer. There are a lot of points in this book where I read a line, for example, which went something like, I'm gonna say it a lot better than Adam Silvera did, so yeah, copyright it. But the line essentially went something like, he was dead, and by extension, I could no longer live. And I had that line really touched me. There were a lot of metaphors, like, not metaphors, that would be too subtle for Adam Silvera. They were very on-the-nose similes, which went, like a cannibal eating his own arm, or a dog with a favorite bone. And I thought those were like, made me feel something. They were very interesting ways of describing grief and describing how kind of minuscule, insignificant, and crushed down, how small you feel by grief, because it's so big, and it's so big inside of you with a hole right in the middle, and also around you. It's so physically and emotionally draining. But those kind of grief were never explored. We're told he misses that, he misses that. But it's like the book was written by someone who has never actually experienced grief, just read a lot of books in which people experience grief, and like those books, also like Wattpad books, like not any good actual books. Now, the book itself, I can appreciate for those things, okay? I can appreciate the fact that initially the book was going pretty good. In fact, I made a Spotify playlist for it, link in bio, right? I made a Spotify playlist for it, I was having a good time. I was like, maybe Adam Silvera, maybe you aren't so bad. Maybe I am going to give you another chance. But then I just saw how repetitive the book got. If this guy mentions history one more time, especially with that ending, I just know Adam Silvera thinks he ate with that ending. I just know that he wrote that ending, he submitted the draft, and he was like, yes, shots were fired. Been shot instead of having to read this book. It's so obvious that this guy has never been a teenager. I mean, he's not immortally. I'm sure he has been a teenager, but he doesn't know how to write teenagers. He keeps using words like legit and like making all of these like really kind of sexual like directions I did not like where the book went, and just saying legit over and over. I think I said that. Also, all the songs were so old. Like a lot of these writers, you can just tell they don't know how to write for their own, for the age they're writing for, because they just talk about their youth, and that would be fine. But if you want to write about your youth, then set the book in the 50s or something. Like no offense, I'm sure he was born like a bit after that, but yeah, set the book in that time period. Then why is the book set in the 2000s or something? If you are writing about all of these like classic songs that you listened to as a kid, it bothers me, even though I like the inclusion of songs. In fact, the only thing I remember truly from this book is American Pie, because of that ending, which was such a way to end the book. And my last criticism of this book is the fact that it's so long. This is something that is common with all Adam Silvera books. I'm starting to realize day by day they are just too damn long. And for what? For what, Adam? For what? Anyway, those are all my thoughts for today. And yes, that's my review for this book. I don't know what to do with these books. I like them. I have an emotional connection with them. But they are so poorly written, and I feel like BookTube or I don't know, Quora or whatever, whoever's listening to this, we can do better. We can read better, and we can definitely write better. Bye.